I'm seeing with increasing frequency listings that indicate sellers prefer to sell the home as is. Well, don't they all? Literally all sellers prefer to sell their homes as is. That is, if given a choice between not lifting a finger and doing a whole bunch of work, they would all choose the don't lift a finger option. And what about buyers, rightly terrified of such listings? Stay tuned. Hi everyone, I'm Matt DeFanis, broker owner of RE/MAX Realty Associates with offices in Champaign, Mahomet, and Monticello, Illinois. Besides more than 25 years of full-time practice, I also teach nationally on negotiation principles and strategies. Today I want to talk to you about a phenomenon that significantly impacts both buyers and sellers. It's a practice I refer to as as-ising listings to death. Let's look at this from the perspective of buyers first. Most buyers who see that sellers are selling a home as is assume the seller is aware of major problems and the seller is trying to foist all the problems upon the buyer. Across the entire spectrum of buyers, this is going to lower the perceived value and the appeal of the property. Now, a savvy buyer might think they got a handle on what it is that's wrong, they're cool with it, but they're going to try to use that to score a deal. In other words, they're still interested, but now they're looking to weaponize this against the seller. A typical first-time buyer, that's one who's a bit nervous, but not some paranoid conspiracy theorist, will be terrified, and they may rule out the house without ever saying a word to their buyer agent. For that buyer, the marketplace of options just shrunk, even if the house might have been a perfect match made in heaven, all because the listing verbiage scared them away for no good reason. Now, looking at the seller's side of things, it may seem like a good move on behalf of a listing client to offer or to agree to market a listing as is in an effort to minimize hassles for that seller. But is this really in the seller's best interest? It depends. If the seller's top priority is not lifting a finger and selling as is absolutely essential, well then yes, it might be the right move. But it's not without a cost. I would never advise a seller to suffer through the hassle of inspections, repairs, and other pre-listing preparations just for recreational purposes. So why do I typically have a pre-listing checklist of recommended inspections and repairs? Because those recommendations are designed to achieve the best overall outcome for that seller client. If I have a listing client who says in our first meeting, I'd like to sell as is, well, I'm going to have some follow-up questions. As I said at the very top, every seller would rather sell as is. The follow-up questions are designed to help me understand the seller's preferences and priorities, so I know whether torching some market value is in their best interest. For some sellers, like an estate where there isn't anyone here locally to do or even to supervise a bunch of boots on the ground work that we would do to maximize final selling price, well, okay, as is might be best. That might be true even if $3,000 of work done now might yield an additional $10,000 in sales price. In this scenario, it doesn't make any difference how much more the home could potentially sell for if they simply don't have the money to spend or have the capability to oversee getting the work done. If, on the other hand, the seller has some cash on hand or even the ability to borrow the money, then why in the world would they want to let $3,000 of expenditure now cost them $10,000 of selling price? So what happens when the listing agent simply accepts that seller's comment about preferring to sell as is? They ask no follow-up questions, they give no custom-tailored advice, and then they put in the public remarks field that the seller is selling as is? Well, there's two likely outcomes. First, they will never know which buyers they scared away who never even came to see the listing because of the thoughtless as-is comment. Was it 25% of the otherwise well-suited buyers? Maybe closer to 50. We'll never know. Either way, the listing agent has just driven down the demand, which will logically cause downward pressure on the value of the house. The other outcome is that people who aren't scared off lean into the listing, but they do so empowered by the listing agent's self-inflicted marketing impediment. This type of buyer figures there's less competition. Additionally, they may assume that only a seller in some state of distress would sell as is. This creates a reaction among these buyers very much like a shark sensing there is blood in the water. They're ready to go in for the kill. With this type of buyer, you've just turned your seller into prey, and you've thrown them into a small pool of limited, interested predator buyers. Was that really doing right by your seller? Having been through these situations countless times with my own clients, both buyers and sellers, I'll give you some insights into how I would handle the underlying issues that often lead unwitting sellers and their agents to as is their listings to death. Most importantly, eliminate information vacuums wherever possible. Complete information is paramount. If we send a strong signal that there are serious problems with the house, but we don't offer details, then we're inviting buyers' minds to run wild. They'll logically assume the worst about every possible defect and every possible cost to repair. So what is it that interrupts that kind of thinking, where the dollar signs are just spinning in their eyes like a Vegas slot machine? It's getting a thorough inspection of the defects in question, along with a credible bid that monetizes the necessary repairs. I can't blame a buyer in an information vacuum who thinks the issue may cost $10,000, but when I credibly provide all the details to make clear it's only going to cost $5,000, and I've got a trusted professional at the ready to address it, then the buyer no longer has to assume the worst, and their numbers suddenly fall into alignment, or at least close to alignment, with how we've monetized it on the seller's side. There are certainly situations where buyers legitimately need to allow for wildcard expenses. If they're buying a 100-year-old house with plans to do a gut rehab, at some point along the way, there will be surprises that you have not fully accounted for in the original plan. But most common situations are just that, common. So we know from experience what it costs to address it. When I'm working with buyer clients, I coach them not to fear the as-is-to-death listing. I explain this doesn't mean the sellers are trying to foist a ticking time bomb onto them. In most of these situations, if the buyers are well suited for the property, I'll have to assist with more due diligence to fill in the information vacuum because the listing agent often has not done so. But that's fine. I'll let the marketing faux pas work to my buyer's advantage, potentially helping them snag a good house that they would have assumed was a disaster based on the listing verbiage. Pre-listing inspections are a huge part of preemptively filling information vacuums. I tend to have a very low rate of clients who get under contract whose sale falls through without closing. But when it happens, it is usually the result of information that was revealed at the wrong time. That is, if there had been an inspection prior to listing, the seller and the listing agent would have known about the issue and could have taken steps to address it then. Instead, everyone found out after the buyer's inspection. By that time, we may only be 2 or 3 weeks away from the closing deadline, and the seller may have already lost 2 weeks of marketing time with the house under contract and off the market, only to have the deal blow up. And now we're back to square one. If the issue in question would have always been a deal breaker for this particular buyer, knowing about the issue before making an offer would have saved the buyer time and money spent on the inspection. For the seller's part, there would still be an issue, or maybe multiple issues needing to be addressed, but they would have avoided the added cost, added inconvenience, added delay, and the stigma associated with having their house go under contract, then go back onto the market after a buyer's inspection. I'll leave you with my MAT-specific standard for what sellers should address, or at least know that they need to address before putting their house on the market. It's the any reasonable buyer standard. That is, what items would any reasonable buyer demand to have addressed as a condition of the sale? That would include items that our standard contract language would require. It also includes any conditions that would be a roadblock to mainstream financing. Once the any reasonable buyer items have been accounted for, we disclose the whole inspection report, any specialty inspections, like if we have a furnace and AC inspection or a roofer's report, and any bids for defects that would otherwise be presumed by reasonable buyers to cost more than the bid amount. Comprehensive, objective, and timely information is critical in most successful real estate transactions. Understanding how the other side thinks can help you make better decisions that protect and advance your own interests. And while I provided lots of general information in this video, there's no substitute for individual, custom-tailored expert advice from your own broker. As always, if my team and I can assist you with your real estate purchase or sale, please reach out to us. We would be delighted to hear from you.